everybody who's joining us for the fourth week of this show. We have a huge lineup of cases tonight, and I know it's been a heavy news week. There's been a lot in the news everybody's been paying attention to on YouTube and on newscasts and things, so we appreciate you joining us tonight. We want to talk about three really big segments that we have, cases that we've been following, some just this week, some for the last 4 years. And we have a really big one tonight. We want to start with our first segment, the big case. So this case is all about the Benjamin Anderson murder case. This is something unfolding here in Phoenix. And when I say unfolding, honestly, it's been unfolding for the last almost 4 years here. So I want to give you the case briefing and the details so that you understand how we got to what's going to happen here tonight. Benjamin Anderson lived in Central Phoenix. He was a real good guy by all accounts, family man. He loved his friends. I mean, literally just a top-of-notch, top-of-the-line guy. And it was back in New Year's Eve of 2021 when he had brunch plans, and he abruptly canceled those. It was after that he went missing, and his friends really jumped into action and started, putting out flyers, getting the news involved and saying, hey, we're looking everywhere for Ben Anderson. It is not like him to go missing. Even to skip the brunch was odd, but to not answer his phone, to not be reachable, it was very, very bizarre. Now, this is where the case gets pretty odd. As his friends are working on trying to locate where he is, they call the car company and they ask Lexus, hey, can you get the GPS data for his car? The dealership or the company eventually gives them that GPS location, and they can see that the car is going around the area of I-17 in Dunlap, which is a really odd area for Ben to be traveling in. It wouldn't have been something that he typically would have frequented at that time, nothing like that. So the friends, Ben's friends, actually go to the area where the GPS is showing. And this is where the case is extremely unusual. These friends see Ben's car driving, but with strangers. Ben is not in the car, and those people see Ben's friends and take off. And this becomes kind of like a bit of a high-speed pursuit on the streets of Phoenix. Ben's friends ultimately pulled off because it was just too dangerous. But at this point now, everybody's extremely alarmed, as if it already wasn't concerning that Ben was missing. Now it looks like people we don't even know are driving Ben's car, and he's still nowhere to be found. Well, about an hour after that, Ben's car is found once again, but in the UEI parking lot. You can see it here on your screen, torched, completely burnt. Ben is not in the car. I remember at this point, photographers and news photographers, journalists, reporters are meeting up with his friends. They have the car. They know Ben's missing, and everybody's frantically trying to figure out what's going on. To make matters more complicated, this was New Year's Eve of 2021, so people are starting to celebrate and get ready for New Year's Eve parties in the city. And so there was just a lot going on. It was pretty chaotic. Well, what you're seeing on your screen right now, Table Mesa West in the desert, about an hour after the car was found, what Ben's friends didn't know at the time was Ben's body had actually been found on fire in the desert north of Phoenix off of the I-17 and Table Mesa Road. And this was odd because the car had been found not that long before that, which means there had to have been a pretty robust plan to get Ben's body to the desert area there. And it was actually people doing shooting practice and target practice that saw the flames, ran over, did not realize it was a body. And I will never forget, we watched this body camera footage over and over again of when Ben was found by sheriff's deputies. And they thought possibly, the people reported this in the sheriff's office, thought possibly it was a mannequin that was on fire. They also at the time reported that they thought maybe there was fishnets on his legs, but after going back and analyzing this, people actually think that what was on his legs was the netting of his car, potentially. The car being burned would possibly lend itself to that. This was so bizarre. We find Ben, his friends are absolutely devastated, and I think everybody at that time in the news world is thinking, okay, they're going to find somebody pretty soon. If there were strangers driving his car and his body was found and you're looking for anything you can get on that DNA, what was found in the car, surveillance footage of showing any of this, I think people think, okay, there's going to be arrests soon. And honestly, we all thought that. And when I tell you it was not only not soon, but we've all waited years to learn anything more, that's not an exaggeration. Years and years have gone by to the point that about 2 years ago, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office said that they were planning on submitting charges soon to people they believed were involved in Ben Anderson's death. That was told to us about 2 years ago. It didn't happen. And so as we started pulling more kind of layers back on this case, we learned that they actually found Ben's cell phone about 3 months after his murder in a canal. Now, a cell phone these days, I don't have to tell you guys, you know it, but they're absolutely critical to a criminal case, to a murder case. Would that show us maybe where Ben was going, who he was communicating with? Would that show any sort of applications that would have maybe given any sort of inkling as to was something odd going on, was something threatening going on? But for a long time, MCSO told us that they were having trouble getting into the phone for 2 reasons. One, it was waterlogged from being in the canal. A fisherman had found it. And 2, they couldn't get into Ben's passwords. His friend had his iCloud account password, but it was like they couldn't get into the phone or past that. And so we never heard anything more on really what happened with the phone. So fast forward to this past Friday, we had heard that something was coming down in the case, that we were going to learn who was going to be facing charges or should be facing charges in this case. And I want to show you the suspects that they now have in this case. That's Jaden and Richard Kaufman you're seeing on your screen. They are a father-son duo, and we now know that MCSO is recommending charges against them to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. What does that mean? Well, they have a set of charges that they believe these 2 family members should face in Ben Anderson's death, but ultimately the Maricopa County Attorney will decide what they'll face. Now, there's a little bit of a separation between the 2 of them. That's Richard Kaufman you're seeing on your screen, the dad. We do not know the exact charges that Richard is facing. Why? Because he is not in custody, according to MCSO. That specific detail would lead me to believe that they do not believe Richard Kaufman was enough of a dangerous threat to put him in handcuffs now and make sure he was behind bars before they announced charges. But that's a risky move by MCSO, because now that he knows that there's charges out there and that he could be facing these, I mean, they have to be assumably monitoring his whereabouts. They do not want him to leave or flee, but that was a risk that they took by saying that they were submitting these charges. Jaden Kaufman, on the other hand, we've learned quite a bit about. I'm going to read the charges that he is facing. We know these are what they submitted to the county attorney. We're talking about first-degree murder, arson, robbery, tampering with evidence, theft of means, and abandoning or concealing a dead body. In the gamut of criminal charges that you can face in a case, that is about the worst of the worst, the most serious cases. And so when we're looking at Jaden Kaufman, and what you're seeing on your screen right now is important. He's wearing orange. Why? Because he is in the prison system here in Arizona. We went back and looked at what other charges or cases or criminal history and activity he had, and we found quite a bit. So I want to actually show you a timeline that we put together and explain to you what else we know about Jaden Kaufman. And going back, you can see here, September 28th, 2021, we learned he shot his friend in the head. Then in December 31st, 2021, New Year's Eve, that's when he allegedly killed or was involved in Ben Anderson's death. A few weeks later, we learned he assaulted a man in a wheelchair. He was caught for that wheelchair assault the next day. But the bigger problem is that in September of 2022 is when he was caught for shooting his friend in the back of the head. That was a huge problem because he was not caught for about a year. And it was in that time frame that he was able to allegedly kill Ben Anderson. I wanted to learn more about this friend that he shot and killed 3 months before Ben's case. So we got court documents, and then we realized we'd actually covered this case. It was a 21-year-old kid. His name is Cody Dittmer. Apparently, according to court documents, Cody and Jaden Kaufman were trying to do some drug deal with other people. They were friends, though. They were there together. And these witnesses reported that out of nowhere, Jaden Kaufman shot Cody Dittmer in the back of the head. Why? It didn't say. They said there was no argument, nothing specific. And so when I talked to Cody's dad this past week, he didn't even know about Ben Anderson's case. I told him about it, and he was stunned when he learned that the same person, 20-year-old at the time, Jaden Kaufman, who took his own son's life, now possibly took Ben Anderson's life. I mean, that was just, he was beside himself. But he also said he wasn't surprised based on what he learned about Jaden Kaufman with his own son. And he actually was very kind and wanted to reach out to anybody in Ben's circle offering any sort of support after learning all of this. But I mean, clearly, Jaden Kaufman is a dangerous, brazen, and what seems to be calculated killer. And he's in prison for those crimes, but unfortunately not being caught for that murder before, which he ended up pleading down to manslaughter, made it possible for him to be out and to kill Ben Anderson, potentially. That's the charges. Those are the charges that we're looking at. When do I think we'll learn about Richard Kaufman's charges? Probably when the county attorney makes a decision on if she's going to go forward and prosecute those. And it would be at that point then that we would learn, you know, what he's looking at, because it could be different than Jaden. Do they believe Jaden actually committed the murder, the first degree murder, and did Richard help him cover it up? Potentially. Were there other charges involved there? We don't know. Now, there's a huge part of this case that is completely unknown at this time, and that would be how on earth did Ben Anderson get connected to Jaden and Richard Kaufman? To this day, we have no idea. And because we don't know how they were connected in the first place, we also don't know what the motive would have been for this. I mean, this was a gruesome and heinous crime. This was overkill. I mean, it wasn't just a shooting or a stabbing. We're talking torching the car, potentially torturing Ben, lighting his body on fire. I mean, this was just to the nth degree. And so it's really hard to think about, had that been a crime of opportunity, or was this random that they would do that to somebody randomly? But then what is the connection? And typically in a case like this, they would have taken them into custody, arrested them for this, and then we get charging documents, what we can see in court documents when they would go through and appear in court for the first time. But this is different because we don't have Richard in custody, so there's no court documents there. And Jaden Kaufman's already in prison, so he's not being arrested and brought to jail. So we don't have those court documents either. It is extremely bizarre, and it's something that everybody is waiting to learn. I want to bring in our live interview tonight. Ben's best friend, Dan Stahoviak, is joining us live from Washington, D.C. tonight, but Dan lives here in the Valley. Dan, thank you, first and foremost, for being on the show tonight live. You and I are no stranger to each other. We first got connected almost 4 years ago when Ben first went missing and was murdered. And I can't believe we're at this point now, but that it's taken this long. And I think for so long, we were always talking, you know, is it going to be this year? Is it going to be this month? Is it going to be this week? And finally, these charges are announced. I know I asked you this before, but just bringing in our YouTube live viewers tonight and our streaming live viewers, you and your friends have no idea who the Kaufmans are?
No, and hearing all those facts again as you walk through them were really tough, reliving it. But we don't know who these people are. I don't know who Jaden is. I don't know who Richard is. I've never seen them before. I don't know how Ben got connected with them at all. And it's a mystery to any one of us.
And I know you were asking other friends, other people, hey, have you guys heard any of these names or anything at all? And even in that greater network, nobody, right? Nobody had heard of them.
Nobody. And we've all looked to see if there's some family friend connection, something on social media. There's nobody that we can find so far that has any sort of connection to Ben or to any one of the close friend group that we can find.
I mean, it's extremely bizarre. When you heard about Jaden's past, criminal past, and the other crimes he's convicted of now, killing another person and assaulting a man in a wheelchair, and it wasn't just assaulting a man in a wheelchair, it was a random person in a Walgreens that is not very far from where Ben was living in Central Phoenix. You know, what goes through your mind when you hear that the person that may have taken your best friend's life has done it before?
It reconfirms to me that justice is slow. And, um, Jaden killed Cody, as we know now, in September 2021, 3 months before he allegedly killed Ben. And it took a year before his arrest for that killing of Cody. So it just shows to me that justice is slow, and it's unfortunate because as unfortunate as Cody lost his life, it could have been prevented if things had moved quicker. But this kid went on a crime spree for several months, as you previously mentioned, and seemingly all drug related, for some reason or the other. And it's just sad.
And you're right, drugs were involved actually with both of the suspects. Even Richard has a criminal past of drugs and DUI. It was less severe than Jaden's, but I mean, as far as you know, was Ben into drugs at all? Would that have been a possible connection?
No, I mean, Ben rarely took Tylenol. So he was just one that just didn't. He just never took drugs. I've never known Ben to take drugs. He drank very rarely alcohol, and I mean, obviously when we were younger in our early 20s, we drank and hung out together. I've never seen Ben do drugs. And so the fact that I can't see any connection related to drugs at all, because Ben hated it. He hated drugs. He hated people on drugs. He hated people who were drunk. He's been around me drunk many times, and he wasn't a fan of it. And so I don't understand it. I don't.
You know, one part that makes this case honestly just very weird is what happened the night that he went missing. And I said it earlier in the show, but you were part of the group that saw these strangers driving Ben's car in the Sheridan parking garage in Phoenix. Now looking back, can you take us through exactly what you saw at that time? And is it possible that it was Jaden and Richard in the car?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, we had received some information from a 911 dispatcher, actually, because we were begging Lexus to give us information. And we had found out through a 911 dispatcher that Lexus had called and reported the location of the vehicle, because they would only talk to law enforcement. And we found that the car was seen at the Super 8 off the 17 and Dunlap. And we went there. The call had already happened. The car was gone. It wasn't located there anymore. And we just randomly started driving. All we could think of doing, as we did all night, was just drive around looking for anything. We had nowhere to go. We didn't know what we were looking for, and we just came. It was just after midnight on New Year's, and we went into the parking garage at the Sheraton Crescent, and there was this car. I had his plate number. I saw 3 people. There were 4 of us in our car looking. I was in the front seat. All of us saw what we thought was a pink beanie. And that was very distinct because it was late, it was dark. And we saw the pink beanie. The people in the car saw us, we saw them. They appeared to be putting a bag of something on top of the car, but nowhere did we see Ben. And obviously became alarming at that point. Now looking back, the booking photo for Jaden, in and around that time, he had pink hair. And so it's possible that the pink beanie, because it was so quick when we were moving in the car, could have been his pink hair. I don't remember seeing. I thought all 3 of the people we saw were younger. Richard's face doesn't look familiar to me, so it's unclear if he was there at the moment. But we did see the pink, the color of pink when we came around that corner.
I mean, it's eerie now, obviously, looking at it kind of like, okay, going back, what did we see nearly 4 years ago, and does it match the people that they've found? In talking to MCSO, I've asked them multiple times, how did the Kaufmans know Ben Anderson, or was this random? And while we haven't gotten an answer on that, they did make it a point to tell me that they have every kind of evidence in this case that ties the Kaufman. So that would include direct evidence like DNA, that would include circumstantial evidence like surveillance footage and other, maybe locations that put them in the area, and that they have forensic evidence. And in the way that they were describing the forensic evidence, to me, I took as like something digital, which could then be from Ben's cell phone that they've been working on trying to get into for years. Do you one know if they ever got into the cell phone, and whether they did or didn't? Do you think they would find some connection or something that would give them any sort of clue as to how these three, Jaden, Richard, and Ben, would have somehow come into contact?
I don't know if they ever got into the cell phone. We had heard that the phone was found in a canal, and it's somewhere in West Phoenix. And I don't know. What we find out later is that it would have been there for 3 months. I will say that we did everything we could before we came across the car. I had actually, since I have known Ben for so long, I knew every variation of his password was something related to his grandmother, where he grew up, and I was able to get into his Find My iPhone. Now, his phone hadn't pinged since that morning, and so I knew that his iCloud, because it told me when I logged in, his iCloud had backed up the night before he went missing. And so my thought process, and I don't know this for a fact, but is that anything after that iCloud backup the night before would be on the physical cell phone. So there's possibly something on that cell phone that they knew was there or they were looking for, and that's why they were trying to get into the phone, is my assumption. And whatever was on the iCloud, and I don't know what Ben selected to be backed up. He had an iPad, he had an Apple Watch, as well as an iPhone. Whatever was there stayed there, but it hadn't backed up since the night before.
Interesting. So it's about maybe a 24-hour period that could be just on the phone itself, and not something they would have had access to.
Maybe 12. Maybe even 12 hours. I think, as you mentioned earlier on, I spoke to him at 8 a.m. on New Year's Eve. And 8 a.m. the dot, I remember it vividly. It was a very, very short phone call where he canceled brunch that we had planned. And, his mom believes she talked to him around 9:30 or 10. And his body was found between 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're dealing with a very, very short period of time where he had contact with people and he goes missing. Unbeknownst to us, the alarm was set amongst all of us at 5 p.m. and he was already deceased. But we just didn't know it at that time.
Right. And I remember that as we were all covering it with you guys. I mean, at that time we thought, hey, we're searching for him. We don't know. And turns out deputies had already found him. There's an interesting situation that you actually found with Richard Kaufman. So we were able to confirm that Richard was working as a service advisor at a local car dealership here. And it was actually you who had a connection to somebody that found or had an appointment with him up until this past weekend?
Yeah, I grew up in Peoria, Arizona. I went to school with Ben in Peoria, Arizona. Family, friends live in the area. And I had a family member who had actually gone to this dealership. I had found that Richard was associated with this dealership. And I asked this person, who had made the appointment before any of this was announced. And I had spoken to them after they came back from the appointment. And I said, who did you deal with? And he said, Rich. Rich was the person I had the appointment with. And my heart sank. I mean, my heart dropped. I couldn't believe it. He showed me the appointment. It was with Richard Kaufman as the service manager at this dealership. And he said when he went in to get the service, they told him Richard wasn't there that day and somebody else would assist him. But the likelihood of something like that happening is very low. And I just couldn't believe it. I was stunned that somebody, it's just so close to home.
Oh my gosh, right. And we know Richard's picture as a service manager has been taken off that dealership's website at this time. I
Yes.
did make connection with corporate of that dealership who said no comment to what was going on. Understandably so. It's, the dealership itself did nothing wrong, and that's why we're not naming the dealership or talking about who it is. But we know now and can confirm that Rich Kaufman, reportedly was working up until this past weekend. And it was on Friday that they announced that these charges would be recommended. So, I mean, clearly other people didn't know that those were coming down the chute for him. And unknown if he knew that something was coming down. The question I now have is, where is Richard Kaufman? Do they know where he is? I mean, it was definitely bold for MCSO to announce that there was going to be these charges against him in this high-profile murder case, but not have him in custody. So, I mean, I definitely have questions, just like I think everybody else, about how they're going to move forward with that and what's going to happen next. I want to ask you one more question. We all wait for 4 years, none more than your friends and Ben's family, for answers as to who possibly did this. And when we get these charges and we get these faces and we get this criminal history, we start to, put just a few more puzzle pieces together. Where does this leave you emotionally right now in this long road to justice about these updates and where we are in the case?
I think it leaves us all with more questions.
Yeah.
As we anticipated, I think, right? And we all want to know the why, the what happened, who was involved. And, we get for the last 4 years, we've been hearing rumors, getting little bits and pieces of information. And this is just another piece of information, a very significant piece, but it just opens the door to more questions. I think I said the other day, I'm going between anxiety. I'm just nervous because I want to know more, but then I sort of don't, and I don't want to know the details of what happened, but I also need to know so that I know that, he's with peace, honestly. And I think the family and all of his friends really want that closure, to understand why somebody did something like this. And when they said the charges, those are all very, very significant felony charges. And it tells us that Jaden was involved from the murder to the body being found 30 miles north in the desert, because he's being potentially charged with disposal of a dead body and concealment of evidence. And so we didn't know if the people we saw in that car were connected to the murder or if they just found the car later. And this sort of gives us another piece of that puzzle to understand that he was involved from the start to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. It does answer that. And I guess we just don't know now where Richard falls into that. Is he there from start to finish? Will we hopefully learn that soon? I remember too, when we talked, you said, Ben would have been doing the same thing for any of you guys
100%.
if this was the roles reversed. And I think, for years now, we've seen these pictures of Ben with you guys, with the friends. And I know everybody wants justice in this case. It seems like we're inching closer and closer. Finally, the biggest break of all so far. But I think it would be nice for everybody to learn sooner rather than later how they were ever connected and why. I mean, you make a great point. Like, who wanted to do that? And it does seem it was done in such a quick fashion, as you've said before, that it does seem that there was some planning that would have been involved in that.
Yeah, I know just something about Ben. Ben was just as inquisitive as we were about everything. And Ben would still be fighting for answers as well for any one of his friends. And just something funny about Ben is that one of his favorite shows was Murder She Wrote, and he watched it constantly. So he loved even a sitcom, story.
Okay, we might have lost Dan there. Dan, can you hear me?
Oh no, yep,
Okay,
I can
hear
you.
you. You're back. You're back. We're good. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Continue on with
sorry.
your story. We've got you.
No, I was just saying. I know Ben would have done this. He would have kept fighting for answers as well, for any one of us. And I think that's really what has kept us and his family and all of his close friends continuing down this path to understand what happened to our friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I so appreciate you coming on the show tonight. I know you're on the East Coast right now too, so we just appreciate you doing this and really everything that you guys have done. I mean, tirelessly fighting. I've often said you are the most tenacious group of friends in a murder case I've possibly ever seen. Just your commitment to Ben and finding answers. So I know as this continues, we'll stay in close contact with you guys. And honestly, really after this too, I think we've all kind of forged friendships and relationships with all of you. And that's one kind of beautiful piece of this is learning that there's great people out there who will fight for their friends. So I appreciate all you've done, and thank you so much for coming on live on True Crime AZ Live. We appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Thanks, Dan. All right, thank you everybody for joining us for that. That was a great live interview, and honestly, one of the best parts about this show is that we have that ability to kind of dig a lot deeper into these interviews and learn a lot more. And Dan has been just a fierce fighter for Ben. All right, we're going to toss a break here in just a sec. Coming up, though, for the first time, we are talking about the Epstein files, that birthday card and the Trump signature. It's been something everybody's been talking about this week. If you are watching on YouTube, you're going to see some behind the scenes here as we go to commercial break. If you're on Roku and other streaming, you'll get some commercials here for 1 minute, and we'll see you on the other side of the break. Welcome back, everybody, for segment 2 of True Crime AZ Live tonight, the expert breakdown. The reason why this is the expert breakdown is because I actually interviewed an FBI supervisory special agent that actually goes into this case with me. The Epstein case, the Epstein files. It's something that everybody is talking about. And this week, none more than the others with the release of this birthday card in the Epstein case. So I want to show you some video of what we're talking about. We learned this. It was this birthday book that Ghislaine Maxwell put together for his 50th birthday back in 2003. And you've got Donald Trump kind of at the center of this. It was this 238-page book. And there's messages and letters from a lot of different people, including former President Bill Clinton as well. But there's a specific page in there that people are taking extra attention to, and it's right here on your screen right now. This is allegedly a page from Donald J. Trump in Epstein's book. And it is a bizarre picture. You can see this kind of typewritten conversation, fake conversation, imaginary conversation between Jeffrey Epstein and Trump with this woman's body drawn on there. And it is a bizarre conversation. Part of it alleges to something like a wonderful secret that the two of them had. And so people have been kind of looking at, well, did Trump know something, a secret? What is he talking about? And this book would have been given to Jeffrey Epstein 3 years before allegations of sex abuse became public. But that page is in question not only because of the message and did it involve Donald Trump, but he allegedly signed it at the bottom. It's his signature. And that's what's really come into attention, under fire, in the spotlight this week. Did he sign it or did he not? And what does that mean if he did? And so reporters circled Donald Trump earlier this week on Tuesday to ask him about it. And I want to play you what he said.
It's not my signature, and it's not the way I speak. And anybody that's covered me for a long time knows that's not my language. It's nonsense. I don't know about, nobody suggested that.
But would you be open to doing that?
Certainly I don't like that whole situation with respect to anybody being abused or hurt, but I haven't even thought about that. It's not my signature.
So Donald Trump obviously saying, I didn't sign it, that's not my signature, nothing like that. So that then brings into account, well, how do you look at a signature and handwriting analysis, and what do you do in that case? And so I interviewed a former FBI supervisory special agent, Lance Lysing. I've worked with him on several cases before, and interesting, I asked him, have you dealt with handwriting analysis back, with the FBI? And he said, yeah, in his case, he actually dealt with it a lot with bank robbery cases. He would take a note that would be written by the alleged robber, and they would then get a search warrant to search the robber's house or car to see if they could find other pieces of written information to corroborate who that person was. And so he has quite a bit of experience analyzing handwriting and analyzing signatures and things like that. And he told me that in a case like this, whether it's criminal or whether in this case, they're working behind the scenes just to try to prove whether this is Trump's signature on it or not, he references something called a handwriting exemplar. And I asked Lance, I said, what's an exemplar? And he said, basically, when you have a document, let's say like the birthday book here, the document in question, you will compare it against something called an exemplar, which is a credible piece of information on a document that shows that person's signature. So the exemplar is what you know to be true from somebody compared against basically like the test subject, like the birthday book. And so he said when you're working behind the scenes, which is what they assumably are doing right now with Trump's signature, they would look for very specific things in this. And I want to play that sound for you now.
Things they would look for are like style of the writing, the slanting of the letters left or right, the pressure used with the pen or the pencil when they're pushing down writing on it, spacing between letters, between paragraphs, between words, and then finally like letter formation, simply how do they write their K's, how do they write their G's, and all of that, if you have enough markers, you can identify if somebody's writing is the same as the exemplar.
So he said probably right now an attorney is looking at this, and I guess what will happen typically in a case like this is an attorney would hire a handwriting expert to then look at this behind the scenes. And Lance said you can usually figure this out pretty quickly. However, he said there's probably no expert that would say 100% definitively, without a doubt, with certainty, this is somebody's handwriting. Because while handwriting analysis is decent circumstantial evidence, it's not direct like DNA would be, or something very specific like surveillance showing somebody writing something. It really would just be used kind of as like yeah, we believe this to be true, but it might not be something where you could ever prove it 100%. And so he said often attorneys will analyze this, and a lot of times in like a court of law, it's with wills. Like, was there a signature on a will? But if we're looking at Trump's case with Epstein, he said they're going to need to find an exemplar, a document, something that Trump signed around that time frame in 2003 to compare it to. And that's because people's signatures can change, handwriting can change, writing utensils can change, anything like that. So you want to try to find it from that time frame. And you think, okay, well, that was over 20 years ago. That might be somewhat difficult. But Lance Lysing was saying that because Donald Trump is high profile and because he was a businessman, I mean, we're talking The Apprentice, things like this, he was doing business deals with contracts all the time. And so he actually thinks when it comes to this situation with Trump, it actually might be pretty easy to find his signature from back then.
Well, Donald Trump's a high profile individual, maybe the highest profile individual. Even back then, he was a very high profile individual. So those exemplars exist in some sense, whether it's from signatures on contracts or a signature that a surveillance video can be matched up with, so you know that Donald Trump actually wrote that and it wasn't like an executive assistant or somebody else, pretending to or putting a signature on an autograph or something. So you have to find an exemplar that came from President Trump.
And again, he doesn't think that that will be very hard to find because of all the documents that Trump has signed over the years in his business capacity and in legal dealings, everything like that. It should be relatively easy. Now, what happens on the other end of that, if it is, deemed to be a credible signature of Trump, I don't think anybody really knows what comes after that. And the Epstein files are still highly talked about, regardless of just the birthday book. There are still files that have not been released. This is still a battle in Washington. Most of the Democrats want the files to be released, that transparency. Most of the Republicans want them to stay sealed and stay private. So that's something that we still are seeing play out over in Washington, and I don't think we'll see it stopping anytime soon. But hopefully we'll learn more on this birthday book controversy that's happened this week. I know there's a lot of people that want to learn more given the nature of what happened with Jeffrey Epstein, everything he was convicted of, accused of, and everything that surrounds that case from a criminal standpoint, an abuse standpoint as well. So at least we learned from kind of a background perspective what is likely going on with the handwriting, the signature right now, how it's being analyzed, and hopefully we'll learn more in the next day or week because Lysing said that you can analyze that pretty quickly. So a lot on that. We'll keep tabs on what happens with the Epstein files, the Epstein case as that moves forward because we know that it is a hot topic and people want to hear more about it. So we'll stay on top of that. We got one more segment for you tonight. Thanks for sticking with us live. We'll be right back after this break. All right, our last segment of the show tonight. If you are on social media, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, or X, you've probably seen this case being talked about, the case of Laken Snelling out of Kentucky. She's 21 years old. She was a University of Kentucky cheerleader on the stunt team, and awful what is unfolding out there. On August 31st, she was taken into custody after her baby was found dead, wrapped in a towel in a trash bag in her closet. They found the baby on August 27th. She told police at the time that she did give birth. It was her baby. And she was then arrested 4 days later, charged with tampering with physical evidence, concealing the birth of an infant, and abuse of a corpse. She is out on bond, an $100,000 bond, and is on house arrest living with her parents now. She's dropped out of University of Kentucky. Her ex-boyfriend has given DNA to authorities. At this point, we don't know who the father is of this baby. She had an ex-boyfriend and a current boyfriend up until now, and we don't know whose baby this was. Now, this case has so many different implications in it. For one thing, the baby boy's autopsy came back inconclusive. What does that mean? It means off the bat they weren't able to tell the cause of death, the manner of death. And that is an interesting and important point, because if it was something like suffocation or something like blunt force trauma, that likely would have come out in the autopsy. So they need to do more testing to follow up on that. The other issue here is they don't know how long the baby was dead. And that becomes a really important part of this case, because you're talking about, was CPR administered? Did somebody try to administer CPR? And that's something they're going to have to look back at too. They don't know how long the baby was alive, or if this was a stillborn baby. And that will also change things as well. This is being talked about a lot in Kentucky as this continues, because people are seeing videos and pictures online of Laken Snelling where she appears to be pregnant, but there's no conclusive evidence yet that says she knew she was pregnant. And that's what has people really up in arms on social media. How did she not know she was pregnant? If you can see this in these pictures, she gives birth. You know, there had to be a better option in a better way. So the Madison County coroner weighed in on what is happening in this investigation now. And this is now going into further forensic testing with the baby. This is what he had to say about what's happening behind the scenes.
There are things they can't see with the naked eye. The coroner can't see, can only see externally. So we have to do these tests. We have to before an opinion is made.
And something that he also was talking about too was they're going to have to test for other conditions, health conditions. What was it? Something where a baby was born in like a stillbirth and something went wrong? Was there something else that would have complicated a possible death after birth? And it is really complicated when you're talking about an infant and tragic who possibly was only alive for a very, very, very short amount of time. But I think people are so upset in this case because this is a popular girl who was 21 years old, and while that's young, it's not a teen, it's not a child. They think she should have known better, and if she didn't want the baby, there are options. And that is something that this case has highlighted. It really brings forth the options that people have in this case and in general. There is a safe haven law. You can drop a baby off and leave them at a fire station with fire personnel, or at a hospital with medical personnel, and not be prosecuted for any sort of crime in that case. That law exists so that something like this doesn't happen, so that a baby, a child has the possibility of living a great life and being able to survive. And so I think people are so upset on social media about this because there were other options. And even if it was something that she was either embarrassed about or didn't want to be a part of, I also heard officials in Kentucky talking about that she could have gone to a different county to get resources as well if she was looking for anonymity. So you could see her mugshot there. She is going through the court system. It does move rather slowly. She was arrested on August 31st, and as of now, she's not due back in court for her preliminary hearing until September 26th. So it's about a month of time difference there, which is actually a rather large amount of time. Typically, we would see somebody in court sooner, at least here in Arizona. Not sure if that's different in Kentucky, but that preliminary hearing may tell us more. She has pleaded not guilty to all of these charges, but I think until we get those results back, further forensic testing on the baby boy, to learn more about what he possibly did die from, that's farther than what can be seen in an autopsy, it's unlikely that we will learn any more information. So it's something we're going to stay on top of. I know people are still talking about it online. We wanted to address it too. There's a case that's honestly a bit similar here in terms of a baby that was left behind and dead as well, something that we've been following in Phoenix. And so I think this kind of resonates with other people here who have been following those cases as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We're paying attention. Jason, do we have any questions, any comments that we need to address before we go? We want you guys to write in live. Jason, do you have your camera? Because I just want to show people the behind the scenes here, if we can. Oh no, he dropped his camera. Okay, so we're not going to show you Jason, but we're going to show you Jason in the week. He does exist in the weeks to come here, just because he's pulling up all the video, calling all the shots here on this show, and it's fun to show you guys kind of the behind the scenes of who's working on everything. We so appreciate everybody for tuning in live. We're going to be cutting clips from this show on social media. So True Crime AZ Live on Instagram and on TikTok. We'll be having everything on YouTube as well. And we so appreciate everybody who makes time to join us each week live. We'll have a great show for you guys next week. And if you are watching this on the back end and missed it live and you want to watch it again, it's actually going to be on AZ Family this weekend on television as well. So we'll be posting about that. If you guys have stories, cases that you want me to cover or look into, please send me a message on my own social media or the True Crime AZ Live messages. I'm monitoring that, and we want to cover what you guys want to talk about. So we would love for you guys to weigh in. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week for True Crime AZ Live.